Welcome back to another episode of the Vet, the Casual. How you doing, baby boy?
Baby boy, let's go. Let's go. How good has this week been? Last 2 weeks? Come on.
Oh my god. Honestly, yeah, the last 2 weekends in UFC have been phenomenal. Last week our analysis was on point, and we kind of missed out on a lot of value on lines as they got closer to the fight night, and so we had to get a little creative with our picks. We had to start calling finishes, over unders, that kind of stuff, and it did kind of benefit us. Our two big plays were really Miles Johns and Jason Witt, straight up, both dominated. Those are both in the minus 150, 160 range.
And we got called out online for our analysis of Miles John. Hey, shout out to the few guys in the comments that want to talk shit, called us knuckleheads. Well, these knuckleheads are banking right now.
There we go. Got to get that paper, And a couple other ones, Strickland Hernandez parlay, Yanez with the under, even Dustin Jacoby calling that first round finish. Just a couple of nice beauty calls when needing to get creative because we lost so much value on these lines. How'd you feel?
Can't forget about the man Yanez, another first round finish. That was the easiest one. I think that is one of the most pure finishers that we're seeing right now at these lower ranks and at these Dana White Contender Series guys. The way he sees the punches, the way he moves, the way he's throwing. I mean, he's laying guys out with pure technique and power. That's why I'm liking the lower ranks right now. They're beautiful to watch. Some of these guys are quick and powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And similar to Kevin Holland, got that one out of the way early as well.
100%.
The main event was, entertaining. Silva took a nice round early, but it was clearly outranked, outmatched as the fight went on. And so we capitalized on the under in that fight, which was nice. But I think the lesson learned is we got to capitalize on some of these early because the way our gut feeling goes, the lines move against us every week.
And shout out to every single other person doing these things, like Fight Night Picks out in Fredericton. These guys were saying the same thing in their video after when I watched theirs. It's pretty funny. But all of us guys that kind of like doing these things for the love of the sport / turning some love into some profit. It's just funny to hear that everybody who looked at these lines early was like, oh God, I can't believe we lost that much.
So much value.
Shout out to Alex Hernandez, my boy, another guy we took by finish. I can't believe, this guy, this whole gym, Fortis MMA, let's watch out because we got a few more guys coming up this week.
And honestly, just to touch on Hernandez a little bit, our analysis talking to him about how he was shit-talking Cerrone and all that kind of stuff, it looked like he really went into this fight as a humble human being. He took that mentality, that approach. He's all business now. And so that was spot-on analysis, 100%.
Yeah, did you hear what they were saying about him being in people's corners and stuff like that? You can just tell the maturity level where he's at now is absolutely rubbing off on his entire team. He looks the part now, and I think the experience he's had at such a young age is going to carry him a lot quicker in what we would call the new era UFC, where we'll take anyone who's willing to fight.
Yeah, and to be honest, I liked him out there. You know what I mean? He was entertaining to watch. You could see he has a lot of skills in his arsenal, so I'm pretty much looking forward to seeing him fight again. Let's jump right into our first one. We got Max Griffin versus Ramiz Brahimaj.
Yeah, so you know what I like about this fight? You got kind of that old school UFC veteran who's been around for a bit longer. I think he's going to have that 3-6 UFC record, right? Sometimes fought the guys that he can't really stack up to. Whereas Brahimaj, I'm going to say it, the 8-2 highlights that I've seen, I'm quite impressed with how he moves. I mean, he's an aggressive fighter, so I mean, if he's going to get tired, things like that, I'm a little worried about him. I mean, he's dealt with a tumor and COVID within the last little bit, so health-wise, resilience-wise, I do lean with him. I think he might have the skills to beat Max Griffin, and I'm not sure if you have any takes there, but I mean, I have some pretty good calls on what I think.
Yeah, we've seen Max Griffin a bunch in history, right? And so I was actually shocked to see that he's the first fight on a prelim card.
Yeah, because when you really think about it, these are the kind of guys that we're seeing maybe get more fights right now, but when you don't beat the guys that really matter to kind of get yourself into that next tier, unfortunately, you either become a gatekeeper of that tier or work your way back down. I think in his case right now, he has what you would call another terrible opportunity where another great prospect is looking to make an example out of him. And unfortunately, even when I think about it, like if I get Brahim Ajit anywhere of an underdog where it's more than plus 110, plus 120, I can't help but want to take it because I think Griffin, out of respect to the fighter and the experience and just the overall heart that we do see, I kind of want to give him that max of minus 200, but I'd be shocked if it was any more than that.
So honestly, you're spot on here. Exactly what you were hoping for. Mm-hmm. He is about a minus 170 favorite. It seems like, that history in the UFC is kind of giving him that bit of a bump. But, in terms of a prospect, there's some pretty good value here on Ramiz at probably around plus 140, plus 150-ish.
That's music to my ears, man. I'm going to be quite honest. When I made these lines, I told myself I'm going to give myself enough of a bracket where over the past few weeks, we just haven't been hitting those lines because we're either getting too personally involved with the lines, if you will, or kind of thinking that Vegas isn't seeing it the way we do. But unfortunately, they have, and they've moved just as quickly away from where we want them to be. So in this case, how can I not lean to the idea that, this line might end up close to a pick 'em by the end of it based on where we're leaning right now? I think we should
especially given the fact that this is a UFC vet that people know a lot about, so he has a large opening line. But as more and more videos and exposure comes out on Ramiz here, that line might close up a lot quicker.
Yeah, because one thing we noticed last week, Pies, it didn't even take till the weigh-ins. We just noticed them quite quickly, and then by the time the weigh-ins rolled around, and then the bells rung, I just can't believe that we're losing that much juice.
That much.
Over the course. Like, we're talking hundreds of betting points. Like, these are things we don't really see. I mean, you take Gervonta Davis. I mean, my boy comes through. But even those unders, like, we cashed in hard on the boxing match. But the UFC is becoming one of those things where Vegas is having a tough time predicting where things are going to go. And like we said, right, the public speaks in terms of where the bulk of the money goes. And I think what's happening is people are starting to get a whiff of things, and it doesn't look as close as you would think,
Yeah, and so this is one where we'll probably see the line shorten up and kind of lose that value. So stay tuned for that, but we'll probably be taking Ramiz a little earlier this week. Going into the next fight, we got another UFC vet here in Darren Elkins. This is a scary-looking man straight out of Game of Thrones. He's fighting Eduardo Garagari. And give us a little bit more on this Uruguayan man here.
Yeah, so Elkins is an absolute vet of the sport. Like, let's be honest, probably the most ridiculous tattoo anyone's ever seen in the history of the sport. It just says the damage across his chest. And I mean, if you look at the last fight, I think you watched it. Do you remember the Nate Landwehr fight where him and Elkins fought to a decision? Well, think back to that. I mean, I'm sure you have quite a bit of a take on that fight alone.
Yeah, I mean, what I recall from that fight is just a bunch of bows being thrown. I remember Elkins' face just bloody. I'm surprised it didn't end earlier than it did, but that was an entertaining one for sure. Nate got the slight edge there.
Yeah, so Nate's actually like an M1 champion out in Russia, so he actually came in with a really good striking background, and I think Elkins is that old school MMA guy, right? He showed his experience, but he also showed his scar tissue. It kind of reminds me of the Diaz brothers, right? It's the same reason where you can kind of beat up the Diaz a little bit, and they might get the edge from the old school refs that kind of know the sport well, because at the end of the day, if it's not in a spot where it's completely going to blind them, where they're going to, their life's completely on the line in terms of just getting absolutely demolished, they're going to know. And I think that's the one area where, especially with MMA fighters, history speaks for itself. This guy's going to cut. He's going to cut bad. And that actually goes into my analysis of the fight, right? Because both guys are going to try to knock each other's heads off. Yeah. And if I'm smart, if I'm Elkins, I'm going to try to take this to the ground. Because the way I see Garagari, he's a 13-1 fighter and 1-1 in the UFC. That one loss is primarily just from an overall grappling performance. I think that all of these guys that come into the UFC now are going to see a new level of versatility, depending on who they fight. And right now, Elkins, this is not a fight he should be losing. And that's me just thinking of who he's lost to and where I see Garagari coming in. That's what leads me to believe this is going to be close, because Elkins could still lose this fight.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of playing into that analysis, I mean, Eduardo's one loss in recent history was by submission, right? And so, if he's going to stay and throw with Eduardo, that's probably not in his best interest to try and dominate this fight.
And that's where some of these guys kind of are a little hard-headed. Let's be real. A lot of guys kind of either want the finish or want to work on their boxing or want to show that they can knock people out. It's just an old school mentality. And I think
Those
champion.
bonuses, man. Those bonuses.
Yeah, but like I think submissions should be counted for that as well. If you can make an exciting finish happen on the ground and make it happen quickly and happen like beautifully. I know. These are the kind of things where I totally agree, right? Knockouts are knockouts. I completely understand. But when you're a guy that cuts easily, when cuts come into play as doctor stoppages or people just being unable to continue, these are not the reasons you want to take a chance on just to lose a fight. This is a fight where he could potentially win. I think he was looking fairly good against Nate. And I think this is a fight where if he can show that he's at least able to go those 3 rounds, able to avoid some blows and maybe try to sneak in some of that grappling, he has a huge chance of either trying to finish this on the ground or even steal a decision. And so...
Yeah, absolutely. And so in terms of odds, kind of what are you hoping for there?
Well, I mean, you'd be surprised based on everything we said, but I think that's what's going to make it close. So I think we can see Elkins, no matter what, be a favorite based on the versatility. So let's say something as low as -110 where it's close to a pick'em, but something as high as maybe -140, -150. It just cannot be higher. It can't be.
It's actually a decent amount higher. He's a -210 favorite.
Wow. I'm a little surprised, and it makes me think about just, this is obviously not a line we're going to touch immediately. That's one thing I can say right now because...
Yeah, there's no need, yeah.
Yeah, because the value for me right now is on Garagorri. Why wouldn't I check into, just how much he might be able to do against someone like, Darren Elkins, who likes to throw them bows and who likes to kind of mix it up a little bit. And frankly, that's not the smartest game plan here. It's not. He could avoid a lot of damage by trying to use up his energy in the first early rounds, by trying to tire him out on the ground to avoid some of those power blows that might cut him a little easier and really try to sneak out that win. But you know what? All the power to Vegas for trying to believe in this guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And stay tuned for that one because we do kind of see some value on the dog there. All right, and so moving on, we got a nice heavyweight bout. We got, King Kong Alexander Romanov. He's taking on Marcus Rogerio de Lima. We saw him fight recently against our boy Stefan Struve. Did not go his way. So give us a little more information on these guys.
Yeah, so you actually did watch Romanov fight his debut, and I think it was because it was an early prelim. And let's be honest, Rock Martinez was not the toughest of competition, so I don't want to spend too much time on him. 12-0, 1-0 in the UFC. That was an easy fight for him. He is moving up into tougher competition right now. But what I do like about him is he looks like a phenomenal grappler, at least for a heavyweight. I like that he's a true heavyweight. And to be honest, he could probably take a punch. He needs to be able to take a punch for the first few rounds. And even if this goes to a decision, I can see him being the winner of this. Let's move into our boy, De Lima. So like you said, he lost to Stefan Struve, right? So he's also lost for our boy Antigulov. You'll remember the name. It's funny that that's a nickname. And you'll also remember Oben St. Preux. So like these are 3 guys where I truly believe from a coaching area, they are fairly beatable. Nothing to take away from them, but in terms of just an overall performance, a good coach will figure out ways to kind of exploit those weaknesses. In this case, I mean, I just feel like this is not a fighter who's either willing to take all facets of the game seriously or he's just not as good. I mean, he comes from a good camp, but unfortunately, to lose to those guys, to test for steroids, to get COVID.
I was going to say, there's a few things you've told me about him that, it seems like he doesn't take it seriously enough.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. He's now at heavyweight only because he's taken steroids. And he's had to kind of work his way up to that level. He had COVID, so fights have been scrapped, things like that. I just don't see him being the type to win this fight. I just can't. And I'm really hoping that the odds aren't too bad, so I'm hoping he's more of like a +120 to a max +170 underdog, but meaning
he's just on the tail end of it. Romanov is about a -280 favorite, bringing De Lima in around +230.
Okay.
Yeah, so they are on that high end. I do think, based on, your analysis on this one, I do think this is one we probably sprinkle a little earlier as, more and more information, more and more exposure of his easy losses coming into play. That line's going to move, and it's not going to move in our favor.
Yeah, because, I mean, he's been in the UFC since 2014, so I think that's like the thing that's kind of really helping him stay alive in the odds area, but Romanov looks like the real deal, and I think this might be a fight that at least helps him get a couple more UFC wins under his belt before we see him take on some real heavyweights.
Perfect. All right, up next, we got a nice, interesting, very tight bout from the south of America. We got Trevin Giles versus Bevan Lewis. Give us a little more information on this one.
Yeah, so I mean, it's one of those fights where Trevin Giles, he won a close split decision against James Krause. And James Krause, I mean, if you know me and we've talked fights, you know how I feel about James Krause. I think that's a pretty good win. At the end of the day, I really think Lewis has that underrated, 7-2 overall, 1-2 UFC record. He kind of brings that raw talent to the UFC, but I think when Darren Stewart and Uriah Hall are your losses, you kind of have that edge on your shoulder. What really kind of shocks me is I feel like a lot of black fighters are fighting each other these days, and I don't know how to feel about that. Right
I didn't want to say it. You said it. I didn't want to say it. Man, I felt the same way.
And I don't know what it is. And I had one of these conspiracy theories where I thought, well, maybe they're just trying to make sure that there's not as many in the UFC, so there's like a limited quota, Maybe there's a lot of good
They
guys
eliminate each other.
Yeah, I don't know if this is arable, but I mean, right now we got another one. And so we're looking at a fight where I just think from an overall, comparison, I think Giles might have even deserved that win. So I'm going to give him the edge as a favorite here. I think he has enough UFC experience. I think he has what it takes to at least make this a brawl, which makes my initial thought process here about a -180 to a -220 favorite. So I don't think he can be much more than that.
This fight is actually a straight pick'em.
Yeah, I totally.
No favorite.
Yeah, and to be honest, if there was a fight on this entire card that I would say, Pies, I have no clue who I would take in this fight, this is the one I would say. And the only reason I gave that -220 was because if you look at it, who James Krause is and who some of the people he's fought, you might just have to give him that edge. But like we said, with this black versus black UFC fighting, we've seen him kind of take a couple losses against really, really good fighters when it comes to Bevan Lewis. So,
yeah, the credibility is there for sure.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the last guy he fought definitely just beat an old ass Anderson Silva in prime time. So we'll see how these guys go. And so
how credible that really is.
well, this is a pick'em, so I mean, it is what it is. We'll see if we actually have any kind of leans or anything like that, but it makes sense to me, man.
Yes, so stay tuned for that one, but let's move on to our next one because this is the one. This is your boy. I know you're going to be excited about this one. Giga is taking on Jamie Simmons. Nice Afro man here. Shout out Georgia, all the Georgian fighters. We love you guys. Thank you for your support.
Yeah, that seems to be our number one reach. So I'm very excited to bring up my boy Giga. And it's not for the views. It's actually what seems to be what got everybody excited about these videos. So let's talk about how in the last couple of fights when we watched Giga, we saw that his defensive grappling, his ability to defend even full-on submissions from good grapplers was really good for that classic-style Georgian kickboxer that we're seeing now come up in the UFC. I think he's the best of that crop, without question. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to give you a little bit of, because I'm sure you've now seen at least 2 or 3 fights of this, so you probably have a bit of an opinion on this.
Well, I was going to say, I'm pretty sure he's 3-0 this year already, right?
Yeah, and so that's what kind of disappointed me, right? So you've watched me big up Kevin Holland so much, but guess what? Giga here is also 3-0, and if he wins this fight, he's another 4-0 fighter this year. And he's looking good in his fights. From a striking...
He's looked... Yeah.
The
tactics, it's so tactical. At no point during watching any of his fights this year, I'm like, oh, I think he's going to lose or he's opening himself up to some vulnerability. It's, the technical aspect, the tactical aspect has been phenomenal.
Yeah, and you nailed that. And it's not because he's trying to knock you out. When you say technical striking, that's what we're talking about, right? We're talking about guys who can kind of, I don't want us to keep your hands down because he's not a Bobby Green, but he's gonna try and throw you those punches that matter. The punches that if it gets to a third round, the points are on his side. And unless you can finish him, you're not going to beat him. And that's what I love about him so far. That's what I absolutely
Can we touch on that for a second? What was Bobby Green doing there?
I mean, do you remember the Lando Venata fight? It was the last fight. We actually lost that fight. It's because Bobby was able to kind of mimic that similar. He had a fight where
Anderson Silva type.
Well, I mean, yeah, but it's too far down. It's too far down. We were all yelling at the television you just can't do that. And the reason why he won the Lando Venata fight is because of a similar reason. Lando likes to just actually be aggressive and keep his hands down and kind of throw really wildly. And Bobby's actually a fairly good defensive fighter, but unfortunately, your head isn't going to avoid everything all the time. But He has his style. He gets him the fights. He gets him the wins against the fighters that kind of match up to him well. But unfortunately, I think.
Yeah, it was interesting to see Thiago really take advantage of that and not try for the home run hit, right? I'll just keep hitting you with jabs if you're going to keep your hands down. And Bobby just didn't adjust. I found it very weird. But anyways, going back to Giga, that doesn't happen with him.
You thought it was a pretty close fight. So, I think Bobby was on the same level. Let's be real. I think that was a close enough decision where I think people – it didn't represent that minus 380 odd, and it also decreased almost instantaneously of the first minute. But, it was a tough fight for both guys based on that decision.
Absolutely. And so leaning into the odds for this one, what are you expecting for your boy here?
Yeah, so I actually have such a feeling that Giga could be the biggest favorite on the card. And tell me so my boy can be promoted as the biggest favorite on the card.
He absolutely is.
Yes, sir.
It's moving. It's moving rapidly. When I looked last night, he was sitting closer to a minus 450. I look right now, he's minus 550.
Okay, and what are your thoughts on that?
Let's lay it now. Now.
Oh, my boy. I'm going to let you carry this on because I'm just so excited for Good for him.
Yeah, that's a parlay builder if I've ever seen one. Let's get Giga into everything. He has this. As much as I love Afro Man.
Afro Samurai, baby. And here's the thing. It's his UFC debut. He's 7-2, and I feel like we didn't even talk about it because we love Giga. But unfortunately, let's give him a quick shout out. I like the way he fights. He's very small for the division. I think you're going to be shocked at what you see. But he likes to fight in close.
It's actually the first thing that stood out to me is his reach, his weight, everything is substantially smaller than Giga.
Yeah, because I think it has everything to do with how he likes to fight too. So he's going to try to take him down. He's going to constantly be coming at him. But what I like about Giga is he's a kickboxer's footwork. So I'm really hoping he can avoid those takedowns. But this guy's going to keep coming. But I think Giga has that accuracy. That's what makes it happen. I think that's what's actually going to separate this fight is he has proven to have what it takes to get away from those positions. And I think that's where you're seeing the odds really play into his favor.
Absolutely. So stay tuned for that one, but I believe we're going to be taking Giga everywhere.
Like Jamie Benn.
So moving on to the main card, we got a nice ladies fight that kicks off the main card. We got Claudia Gadelha out of Brazil fighting the Chinese Xiaonan Yan.
So, Xiaonan, I actually think this fight has all the makings of potentially a fight of the night. Why I say that is Claudia has everything that you've seen from a potential champion over the years. We're talking, 2 losses to Joanna. These are losses where you're going to tell yourself, you're an absolute legend. Nina Ansaroff, Jessica Andrade. The list goes on, right? So for me, good wrestler, terrible gas tank when she was younger, but I think in her last fight against Angela Hill, she showed that she's improved a little bit. Now, she's had a knee injury since that fight. I think that's the whole reason why she hasn't even been able to take a fight since. I actually thought Angela Hill won that fight. We bet on Angela Hill, and so she got that win. I think she has the skills and the game plan to kind of be a tough fight for Xiaonan, but I can't wait for you to watch some tape of this girl because she's an absolute monster.
Really? And they both took down Angela Hill, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Well, the thing with Xiaonan is it's like she's a dominant fighter, man. She's 12-1 overall, 5-0 in the UFC. So I really do believe that this is the kind of fight that's going to make, say, the next title challenger, and especially in her case. Like if she beats Claudia Gadelha and that too in a very dominating way, I think that's going to make her the next potential champion.
Top contender.
Yeah, let's be honest. That's gonna be the fight to watch. I think we're starting to see.
I'm very excited for this one, and it kind of what are you hoping for odds here?
Yeah, so I think if Xiaonan can avoid a takedown, which it looks like she can, when I looked it up, she had 70% takedown defense, and that to me is very, very good going into a fight against Claudia Gadelha, who's going to definitely try to take you down.
Try and take you on the ground.
She takes a lot of strikes as well. I actually think she's adorable. I've always had a little thing for her, so unfortunately,
she's a cutie, man.
I hate to go against her, But unfortunately, this is a fight where Xiaonan has to be a favorite, and we're talking something along the lines of a minus 110 to a minus 200, 250 potentially. But I even have in my notes here that she could be a plus 100, but I actually don't even think she can be anymore. I think she has to be a favorite here.
Man, and given everything you've said, let's lock it in right now. This is a minus 140 right now. I believe this is going to grow again. This will be closer to minus 180, minus
Oh my God. I will say that good luck to Claudia Gadelha. This girl has what it takes to be a champion, but so does Claudia Gadelha. But I think she has to improve her overall, versatility when it comes to striking with the higher level fighters, and also that gas tank. You need to be able to do what you do best for 3 rounds, potentially 5 if that's something you want to do.
And based on everything you said, based on the research I've kind of done, the edge definitely goes to Xiaonan here. So stay tuned for that one. So next up on the main card, we got a nice middleweight bout here. So we got Brendan Allen versus Jan Heinisch.
What?
No, Heinisch.
Heinisch. Oof. This guy, do you have a brown man in your graphic? I just want to make sure.
No, I got this man from Colorado. I don't even understand.
This guy's name is Ian Heinisch.
Heinisch, all right. Is he German?
I don't know. I could be wrong too. Maybe it's Heinisch. If it is, I apologize. It's definitely not Heinisch. So let's actually continue on. So
I'm just thinking high knees, man. High knees.
Right? High knees. That's everyone's yelling that in practice, and he's going, "What?"
Ooh, me?
Yeah. Meanwhile, like the girls' classes, like trying to get their highs knees on. This guy's yelling at them, like, "What?" All right. So, looking at this fight, I actually think Brendan Allen should be a massive favorite here. I don't think his line should be more than a minus 300, but I think he's a massive favorite. I'm going to say as high as minus 180. The reason I believe that is that 3-0 UFC record is against pretty good competition. He's a 5-3 fighter overall. We've seen him fight good fighters. He beat Kevin Holland via rear naked choke.
I was gonna say our boy Holland, man.
And I think he can grind this guy out. I think Heinisch is, pulled out of the first fight due to injury. I mean, he looked good in the last fight, but I mean, he needs to be awarded a little bit here for what he's done. And he beat Mirskrad, who's the guy who lost to Chimaev. He basically beat him in the exact same way. And so you got to give him a bit of edge there, but I think that edge is where I put that line. So at best, a plus 125 and plus 200, but nothing more than that. What do you think?
So one thing I'm going to ask you is, I know the odds here. So I'm going to ask you to make a case here for our boy Heinisch.
Well, I think there's a huge experience factor on his end, and I think that's because he's been in the UFC for a couple fights more. He's experienced losses here. He's experienced what it takes to kind of keep going in the UFC, and right now we're seeing him get those wins under his belt. And so is this his toughest fight? For sure, at least in the recent past. And so I think if he gets this win and he gives a guy like Brendan Allen, who's such a talked about, prospect, that first loss, it's going to put him in a much higher category when it comes to that next fight.
Yeah, and so given Allen's history, like that makes me super excited. He has a lot of credibility on his, win cards, and the odds aren't really reflective of it. This is another straight pick'em. There's no favorite here.
Wow. And what did I tell you before we recorded this, Pies? I said this is the closest card I have seen in the last month and a half, by far.
Yeah, absolutely. And so stay tuned for that one. I do believe, there is some good value on Brendan Allen here. We'll take a little bit more research and kind of lock it in when we know. All right, so up next, we got a fight between a couple of dudes who have some stellar records, man. We got 15-1 Barcelos versus 13-2 Khalid Taha. So we got a Brazilian versus a German here, a German Muslim maybe? I don't know.
I'm pretty sure that's exactly what he is, because when you look at his post, and he's got this hint of Australian accent, and it's funny because he was in Australia telling Australia how Australia is his second home. And so I was really loving that post-fight interview. After that, we kind of realized where he's coming from. Now, there's a bit of history going into this fight with both these fighters. So when we look at Barcelos, he actually, in his last fight, beat Said Nurmagomedov, who actually is close with Khabib Nurmagomedov, who actually trains with our boy Taha. So now you're seeing a bit of history in this fight. So Taha's going into this fight being like, I need to kind of, get some
avenge my boy here.
Yeah, exactly. The beautiful part that I liked about Barcelos' fight against Said is that he showed good cardio towards the end of the fight. So if I'm Taha and the way I saw him fight his last fight, you know what? He won with a really good arm triangle. Like, this guy is no joke on the feet. Let me break that down. This guy is no joke on the feet. He can knock you the fuck out. I'm not playing. He's a powerful striker, but like as a pro, I think you don't get fearful of that. I don't think you get as fearful of that. I think you do have what it takes to kind of make your head movement happen, get your hands up. Barcelos looked very technical against Said, and I think that's going to help him in a fight like this because he's going to be able to do everything. Wherever the fight goes, he's going to have something to say, and that's where I think Taha becomes a bit of an underdog.
Perfect. So, question for you: how's Khaled's chin there?
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, that's the thing, right? He's got that perfect kickboxer style. He even tapes his feet like he's a kickboxer going into the octagon. He reminds me of like the old school days when guys used to come in with like one glove and shit like that. So he's got his style and he wears it on his chest. You know what I mean? But the grappling still looked good. That's what made me a little fearful of for Barcelos. But that's where I still think that Barcelos has the edge, right? He's been doing the MMA game a lot longer. And he's 14-1 as an MMA fighter. He's 4-0 as a UFC fighter. He's 34. We're seeing guys at this age, come into their own. So it's not hard for me to think, like, if Taha's getting the edge for the reasons I just told you, I mean, Barcelos is my pick.
Yeah, I mean, and looking at the odds, he's actually a massive underdog. And so the reason I was fishing that question for you is, do you see, a scenario where we could be taking Barcelos by a finish? I know 4 of his last 5 fights, he has finished and not gone to decision.
Sorry, who's the massive underdog?
Barcelos is a massive favorite.
Okay, so like my max line was -160. So what was his line?
340.
Wow, beautiful. So here's the thing. I think Taha looked good enough on the feet to avoid getting knocked out. Now, Barcelos, if his game plan was to constantly take it to the ground, he has a chance to finish via sub for sure. But I think there might be more value in taking him by points. And
by decision, right?
I don't know if that exists yet, but that would be my lean there, yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was kind of fishing for is, how good is this guy's chin, his defensibility? Can he go the 3 rounds here? You
know what's hilarious about this card, Pies, is the one fight where I thought the one guy who kind of trained with Khabib, who has this kind of scary knockout power and can maybe exploit a guy like Barcelos for his age and all that. The 4-0 fighter with the experience speaks volumes here. I really thought, the max line was going to be, I knew he was the favorite. My min was -120, -30. But yeah, I really have here -160, -170 max. And that's amazing to hear. Good for him. I think he earned that line, to be quite honest with you.
Wow. All right, so stay tuned for that one.
Beauty.
All right, so next up, we got a heavyweight bout that I'm so excited about. Been following Mr. Boser around a little bit lately. Nice mullet man there from Alberta. And so, I'm super excited. We've seen him fight a few times now. He's really making that come up, and he's taking on the pit bull, the veteran in Andrei Arlovski. Very excited about this one.
Yeah, so I'm absolutely excited about this fight too. I mean, I'm sure you've seen Arlovski fight.
This is a dude, I look at his face and I'm like, I feel like I've seen you fight 20 times, but I don't remember a single one of them.
Yeah, so I mean, he's got the mouth guard with the teeth in them. He's the scariest guy. Yeah, back in the day, he looked like a real vampire fighting in the UFC. It was phenomenal. I loved every bit of it. He's shredded. He's still shredded. He's a little thicker now, but he's a beast. He's an absolute monster fighting at this age, 29-19 record. The man's an absolute legend. If there's ever an MMA Hall of Fame, I think he belongs in the UFC Hall of Fame. He's touched UFC gold, so he's been a heavyweight champion before. These are things that, this guy's a legend of the sport. Now, all right, let's talk about our boy Tanner Boser. So why do I think this is a bit of a bad fight for Arlovski? And I think it's only because of Boser's technical striking. I think that he showed pretty good cardio in the second round when he knocked out his last opponent. That's where I believe that it's going to come into play with Arlovski, right? Arlovski's a great technical striker as well, but he's also going to try to aim, he's trying to take your head off. And so if you're throwing the same way, you got to be able to move around. Tanner Boser's footwork is actually quite good. He moves around very well for a heavyweight. And I think those are the kind of guys that might pose, especially the elder Arlovsky, a bit of problems. But he's an athlete as well. Like that's the thing about Arlovsky. It makes me a bit fearful to even take either one of these guys in terms of lines. But I do think he's going to go into this as the underdog. I mean, I know there's probably something you want to say about some Canadian MMA fighters right now, but
yeah, I was gonna say I just want to give a shout out to some Canadian fighters. They seem to be breeding very well. We got a nice young talent coming in, Charles Jourdain. We saw who got robbed in his fight. My
Twice,
boy.
Remember? We thought he beat Andre Fili. Andre Fili just lost to Bryce Mitchell, but we thought he won that fight. He lost a split decision to Fili. Then he got the draw. In his last fight. Poor guy, he deserves better than that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, our boy Dawodu from Calgary, I'm still waiting for that Flames game. Don't forget about that. But, it's nice to see all this young Canadian talent really emerging onto the scene in the UFC.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it, right? The two guys that I would kind of handpick myself are definitely Dawodu and Jourdain. I think they've shown the longevity over the course of a fight to really perform at what I don't want to call championship level, but when you think about the UFC in tiers, I think those are the guys you can kind of scope out from all this, influx of fighters we're seeing. And, there's a new level now. Fighting Andre Fili in that fight was no joke. And I think
I'll give a shout out to our girl Jillian Robertson as well. She's been smashing, so go Canada.
Right? Jillian, of all the fighters, I mean, Jillian Robertson might be the top Canadian prospect, right? When you really think about it. Now, let's going back into this fight. Tanner Boser has the chance to kind of, leapfrog all of them. I think a big win over Arlovsky puts him in a very empty heavyweight division, at least in that contender spot where he's going to have to take on beasts. You know what I mean? Where we're seeing guys like Rosenstruck, we're seeing guys like, Francis Ngannou. These are the guys. Overeem is a tough fight right now, At this point, Walt Harris is having to fight absolute monsters to try and get himself to a title shot if he ever wants one. So that's what's going to be tough. Right now, this is a great fight for him. So looking at the odds, I would say he's about max a minus 220, minus 230 favorite. I can't see Arlovsky as the favorite, but I can see him as maybe as good as a plus 110, plus 120 dog.
You actually nailed this one. Don't even need to divulge into it anymore. Boser is about a minus 240, minus 250 favorite.
Wow. And my boy Arlovsky?
Yeah, about a plus 220.
Plus 220. That sucks. Okay, cool. Good to know.
Yeah, so it looks like Vegas is leaning towards our Canadian boy as well.
Most def.
Let's go, Mullet Man.
Mullet Man, Mullet Man. Ooh, how I love you, Mullet Man.
So that leads us into our main event, one I'm super excited about. We got some nice journeymen here, dudes that even I'm very familiar with. So Thiago Santos versus Glover Teixeira. I'll let you kick this one off.
Yeah, so I'll say a quick little tidbit before you can maybe give us a little experience with these guys. So Santos and Teixeira, I mean, what do they both have in common? They both fought champs. Like, that's the best part, right? These guys are definitely in line to become contenders against Jan Blachowicz. The best part, Thiago Santos, I sent you one clip to watch this week, just one, and it's definitely of the fight between Santos and our current light heavyweight champion, Jan Blachowicz.
Oh, Mr. Blachowicz.
Yeah, and Teixeira is like one of the best fighters of my kind of light heavyweight generation over the course of...
Clipped him.
Yeah, dropped him real clean. And I think Jan knew he was kind of being very irresponsible towards the end of that fight. But, I mean, yeah, just quickly on Glover, I feel like, after we saw that Chuck Liddell, Tito Ortiz kind of light heavyweight era end and the John Jones era really take off, like, Glover was, if the John Jones era didn't exist, Glover Teixeira is probably a very, very likely candidate to be the champion of that division. I think he could have dominated. He has the skill from a boxing perspective. He really likes to get in close and throw power shots and beat you up. His ground game is very sound. So, yeah, I mean, guys like John Jones screwed up a lot of people's plans to become champion, but I think he had the very likely chance of, in his prime, trying to capture that UFC gold. It was there. But, yeah.
And even looking at Santos's lead up to this fight, I mean, he's taken down some of the heavy hitters that we've seen recently. Your Kevin Holland, Blachowicz, his only loss is really to John Jones in decision, right?
Yeah, and that to a split decision that was very close.
Wow.
And so that's where I think, we're looking at two guys who very much have a chance. The thing I like about Teixeira right now is he truly has said that this is the best he's ever felt. And he's shown it. He's 4-0 right now. That's a guy that scares me.
He's coming in hot. He's coming in hot.
And here's the thing. It's a 5-round fight. I've watched him fight a few fights where, like, the gas thing comes into play. And Thiago Santos is a very, very heavy-handed, heavy-footed kind of guy. Like, he throws with power, like absolute mayhem. So I believe it's going to be tough for Glover. But if he can get in close, if he can clinch with him, if he can get him against the fence, take him down a little bit, make him really work for that, take away that power early.
And slow him down.
Slow this guy down, Glover. You have a chance of potentially going 5-0 and making a case for a championship bout. Are you telling me that in 2020, 2021, we're looking at a potential championship bout between Jan and Glover?
Glover at 41 years old? Like,
it's probably not happening because Israel's going to get everything he wants. And so that's already basically been booked. But I think when it comes to just light heavyweight contenders in general, that's a great fight to look forward to if you're kind of like an old UFC head and, just hoping that Israel becomes the greatest fighter of all time. Love you, man.
He can do it. He can do it. So, yeah, I'm super excited for this one. Two vets who are going to be coached well, who are going to be smart about this. I'm curious to see what tactics they all kind of bring out here. And, like you said, see if Glover can slow down, the power of Thiago. In terms of odds, kind of what are you hoping for here?
I still think Thiago's going to get the edge here. I just find it very, very hard to see Vegas giving Glover that chance with this guy kind of beating the current champion and going split decision against John Jones. So I would say that Thiago Santos would have to be minimum a minus 150 to, minus 220 type favorite.
Dude, you working for Vegas now?
Why? What's up?
It's minus 220 on the dot.
Wow. Okay. So it is what it is, baby. I mean, here's the thing. You want my honest opinion? Whether we make it a public play or not, I'm probably laying on Glover Teixeira. I really am. Yeah, I sense something. If you're telling me that this guy is this level of an athlete, I'm going to give him a shot. I think he had the skill. I really think he had the skill to be that level of a champion. I mean, the losses that he has on his record, especially at the age he was and what he was going through, I think are still very credible. I mean, it's not like he was fighting current Alex Gustafsson. Like, heavyweight Alex Gustafsson's a beast altogether. But I think leading into this fight, Santos has had a lot to deal with over the course of say, 2020 as well, So my biggest problem with this fight is it's been scheduled 3 different times. Like, is there a more anticipated fight?
Someone had COVID, right? Someone had COVID?
Yeah. So, I mean, the way I see it is at the end of the day, that makes it even more of a, anticipated bout. The fact that we've had to wait for it 3 different times. I'm so excited for that. Just slobber knocker, Mans are going to be bleeding. And not that I look forward to that, but it's going to be a huge boxing match. I think Glover's going to try to get in close. Glover's going to try to land those quick strikes, those big, heavy uppercuts. But if he's not able to get past those heavy kicks that are coming his way, I mean, I can see a quick head kick maybe stunning him a little bit. I can see Thiago Santos finding that one little clip of a shot that quickly gets him that edge to kind of end that fight. That's the thing about Glover. If he can't really grind out those first early rounds, I don't think he's going to be able to kind of either squeeze out a win over the later rounds or even maybe land that.
And win back the judges need to finish.
It's very difficult for me to see him knocking him out in the early rounds. It would have to take an absolute beautiful shot, and I'm all for it. He's a great boxer, and I think he can land that. But, I think that's a tough shot to land against Thiago Santos, at least for Glover, given the nice little style that he has and trying to get in close and landing big,
Yeah, absolutely. And so it sounds like, we'll probably do a little personal sprinkle on Teixeira, give us something to root for. But this
Oh
is going
yeah,
to be some exciting bout that we're looking forward to.
fight of
And
the night,
just
baby.
sit back, watch, and enjoy.
There's amazing fights on this card. We're talking about Claudia Gadella against, Xiaonan. I think both those girls are gonna come up banging. I think Xiaonan's gonna get the edge there, but we'll see what happens. So, all the luck to Claudia. I think she's adorable. I hope she wins, but I mean, there's no real sides there, and I think that's gonna be one of the best fights on this card. Leading
Yeah,
into
there's a lot. It looks like there's a lot of tight ones in here. That Bevan Lewis fight is going to be a tight one.
Your boy
Seems like
your
there's-
Tanner Bozer, baby.
Oh yeah, there's going to be some entertaining ones for sure. So stay tuned, you guys. Make sure you hit subscribe below. Instagram, Twitter, all our information is there. Give us a follow. We'll be posting our picks, and as always, it's a pleasure, Siraj.
Take it easy, my guy. Everyone, take it. Enjoy the fights. It's going to be an absolute pleasure. I can't wait for this weekend. Probably one of the more underrated cards of the year. Peace.
Absolutely. Later.